All right, we are live and recording. We are on Facebook Live. We'll give people a couple seconds to chime in. We did get quite a few responses and comments about today's show. So I just want to say hello to everybody. Welcome to the Global Empowerment Team. This is Benny Bell and my partner, Khalil Macklin. How you doing there, sir?
I'm doing well, man. It's a beautiful Thursday out here. I may stop at my mom's house later, do some swimming. I'm celebrating my daughter's sweet 16th birthday this whole week. I got her a car. My niece is turning 20 tomorrow, so I'm happy to be on this call today, man. How are you doing? And Bisa, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. We're kind of in a similar situation. My daughter's actually turning 17 next week, and my niece turns 21 this week. So
happy birthday to both of them.
Right, 1 year ahead of you. So we'll be celebrating both of them on Saturday.
Nice. Very nice, very nice. Is everybody doing drive-by birthday parties, or how are you guys celebrating?
So we've been doing drive-by birthday parties. However, this Saturday we are meeting at my parents' house to kind of celebrate in person, social distancing in the backyard. But now that some of the restrictions have been lifted, I think it's kind of a little bit more safe to do so, but we'll still keep the social distancing and masks in place.
Perfect, perfect. Well, I want to do a proper introduction. So today, as you guys see here, we have Interim Police Chief of Richmond, California, Bisa French. Bisa is an amazing young lady. I've been knowing her since high school, and she has done quite a few things in her career as police officer, peace officer, and reaching her current position as the interim chief of police. She started off at the Richmond Police Department in 1998. And one of the things that kind of stood out to me in her accolades in her previous positions was that she was a community policing officer. So obviously, I'll let her elaborate on what that consisted of. Training officer and bike patrol, 2006. She was promoted to the rank of sergeant, where she led, mentored, and developed officers in a variety of supervisory assignments. Then in 2011, she was promoted to lieutenant and assumed the role as a day shift watch commander in patrol. 2013, she was promoted to the rank of captain, assuming the responsibility of the Central District Youth Services Bureau and Traffic Division. And then finally, in 2016, she was promoted to her current rank of assistant chief and is now serving as the interim police chief. So welcome to the show, Bisa. How are you?
Actually, I'm exhausted. I'm not even gonna lie, I'm exhausted. So been a lot going on. 2020 has been a surprising year with a lot in store. So I'm exhausted, but also energized by everything that's going on and the ability to actually make change. So that's where I am right now.
Great, great. Well, I want to go ahead and dive in. We do have some topics we want to address, and one of the things that we kind of we discussed in one of our previous shows is that we don't want this to necessarily be a platform to vent and kind of talk about the problems. We are, I think, aware as a nation that there is a problem, and the problem is obviously systemic racism, and then also the relationships between the police and the different communities across the nation. And then speaking to the relationship between police and African American men, excuse me. So we want to dive in and we want to discuss some application points to where we can start talking about how we can alleviate those problems, how we can eradicate systemic racism within the police agencies, how we can improve the relationships between the police and the community that they're supposed to be protecting and serving. And get back to that peace officer mentality, community server mentality, versus what we're seeing and what a lot of the social media right now is perpetuating as more of a overseer and enforcer, militaristic type of policing. So, one of the first things that we talked about, obviously, that's brought us to this table right now is the shooting in Minneapolis with George Floyd. So you mentioned that you've been very busy with what's going on behind that, the protest. That's going to kind of want to speak, get you to address what your opinion is and what's been going on your table. How has it impacted the community here in Richmond that you serve?
Yeah, so seeing that video was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking. It was disgusting. It was really sickening for me. And it just brought back a flood of emotions to all these other killings of Black men, unarmed Black men across the nation, and everything that, we've been fighting for years. And it was just, to me, it was, the incident itself was heartbreaking, yet, putting on my law enforcement hat, I knew it was going to be a huge setback for all the work that we've done here in our community to really build those community partnerships, because here it is again, we're back at square one with, this happening again. But as I saw kind of what came about it, and the protests and the riots and everything that's been happening since, my devastation over the incident has turned into real optimism for myself and my position as the interim chief, and for law enforcement as a whole, because I'm finally seeing my colleagues across the nation speaking up and speaking out where they haven't before. And that's been a problem. And I'm glad that they have finally stepped up to say this was unacceptable, because there's so many cases that have been unacceptable up to this point that they haven't spoken out about. And it's hard being a woman of color and one of the very few leading a law enforcement agency to be the only ones, stepping out time after time and say, this probably shouldn't have happened. We have to do something different. And so to have that backing where, there might be people that wouldn't follow me, but will follow one of my white colleagues, whatever it takes. I'm just glad that people are stepping out and saying enough is enough, and we're not going to accept this. And I'm also excited to hear that real change is going to come out of this. We always, what happens is somebody dies, there's protests, there's something, that happens, and then things kind of die down, where I feel a different, there's just a different feeling with this one, that our folks, and I'm talking about my folks of color, are not going to let this one just kind of slide. We're not going to let this die. We're going to keep pushing and pushing until we see that change. It's difficult for me because I straddle a line. I'm Black and I'm blue. I wear this uniform, and so that makes me blue. But the skin that I'm in, being an African American and Latina woman, this never comes off. And so I know what my people in the communities that I've lived in and I continue to live in. I actually live in the city of Richmond where I serve. I know what this uniform represents to the community, and I myself have to struggle with that and putting this uniform on, especially when these things happen, because I know that this profession has not been kind to people that look like me and my family members, my brother, my cousin, my husband, and so that's been difficult. But I also know that putting this uniform on and being in the position that I've been able to attain has given me the opportunity to make the change that I want to see.
Nice. You touched up on a couple of different things when you said that you're Black, but you're Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter. You're Black and you're blue as well. And my daughter is 16 years old, just turned 16 as we discussed. And a lot of this has her wheels turning to where now she's really educating herself about the 13th Amendment and women's rights and Black history, and when they got the right to vote, but they were going to war and all these different things. And the other day she heard somewhere, she said she heard it was some police officers in Minneapolis. They were talking about how they're treated like animals, and it was a bunch of white cops, and they're talking about how they're vilified and all these different things, and Blue Lives Matter. And my daughter got upset, and I told her, but you got to realize, like, as a Black officer, a Black female officer, their Blue Lives Matter, but we can't change our skin complexion. You know what I mean? Like for us, you got a double, triple standard because you're a black woman and then you're a police officer, so you're blue as well. So you got a triple negativity almost in society. And I was trying to tell her that, first of all lives matter. But when people say, for instance, blue lives matter, they're saying that cops' lives matter as well. So I completely get it. When people say black lives matter, they're saying that our lives matter as well, because we've gone on for 400 years as though our lives haven't really mattered. And it's been proven time and time and again. So I'm glad that we have people like you, not only in law enforcement, but in leadership positions. And we need to have more people of color in law enforcement, in leadership positions. I'm also glad to hear that you live in the community that you serve. I think that's a big one too. We can't have these cops driving in from San Rafael, police in Richmond, because they got a completely different idea of what a neighborhood may look like, consist of, how it interacts with each other because of where they're from. So all of those things that you mentioned, I'm glad you touched up on it, because that's very important for us to understand our whole community. We have to understand these differences that we have between cops, between blue lives, black lives, all lives. So thank you for touching up on that.
Yeah, and you had mentioned too also your struggle with between blue lives and black lives. So that's, and then also setting a culture outside of blue lives. Because for instance, and that's one of the things that we were going to discuss as well. The culture within the police department, the culture that would prohibit previously other cops from coming up and saying that, okay, this is wrong, because you had mentioned that obviously with now the George Floyd incident, and cops or police officers, are coming out now and saying that that was wrong. We shouldn't act like that, or this shouldn't have happened. Why do you think this particular incident started that conversation versus other incidences that has previously happened?
I think this one, it was so egregious. I mean, all the law enforcement officers I talked to across, especially in our department and around the county, I mean, those are just not tactics that we use. That's not what we train. That's just, I mean, we banned the carotid or the chokehold, whatever people want to call it, years and years ago. So that's just not even something that we trained to do here. And so I think that it was just easy enough to step out with this one and say that is just far, far away from what we're doing. The other ones, there could be mitigating circumstances that they just don't want to speak out against, and they want to hear the facts before they make a decision, and all those other things. And it's difficult. I think from a law enforcement perspective, we get in these situations that happen very quickly. Everything happens very rapidly. It's not slowed down. Like when we look at it after the fact, we're in the moment, emotions are high, tensions are high. There's adrenaline running, and there's so much going on in the moment. And so, we want to be careful in second guessing after the fact what an officer did in the moment and how they felt, and why they reacted the way they reacted. I think we still need to look at those things after the fact and really scrutinize and see what we can do better around training and how we can prevent some of those use of forces from happening. But I think the reluctancy is the fact that people don't want to, it might be them next time getting in this situation, and they don't want to be questioned or Monday morning quarterbacked or whatever. So they want to be very careful in what they say in some of these situations, instead of just calling it like it is, like, this situation shouldn't have happened, and moving from there in terms of how we make things different moving forward. I'm dealing with some situations like that now. There's things that can be done legally. There's things that are within policy, but sometimes there's just things that I don't want my officers to do. It might be legal, it might be within policy, but it's just not what I want my officers to do. And those are more of the difficult conversations to have, because I can't write a policy that says, you shall not do this, when there might be circumstances when they should. So it's about having that conversation and understanding. But really that comes with having more of an understanding with who our community is and how we interact with them, and really have more of a cultural understanding amongst the officers. Like you said, we bring these officers in from Marin, Vacaville, all these other areas in which these police officers live and carry on their normal family life. But that doesn't mean that they know our community here in Richmond. Richmond is very rich in diversity, and you know, there's a long history and background of families, and there's just so much history here. A lot of people are connected, and we need to be integrating, and this is what I'm looking at moving forward, really integrating the people that I bring on my police force with my community. That means before they put on this gun and go out and patrol the streets, they have an understanding of who the people that they're going to be interacting are, what their backstories are, why they might be in the circumstances that they are in. You know, the unfortunate thing is when we get called to places to respond, it's normally for bad circumstances. Nobody calls us to say, hey, I'm having a party, come hang out. I mean, we get called because somebody's fighting, somebody's fighting, family members, somebody got shot, somebody's high on drugs and acting out. I mean, all of these really terrible, you know, we meet people at the worst times in their lives. And unfortunately, I think for officers who aren't from around here or don't understand the culture, especially culture of people of color, they just get more of a sense that this is just how these people are. These people, I'm talking about people of color. And because their outside influences don't show them how we normally interact with each other, they're only seeing the negative, then they get kind of skewed in the fact that, oh, here we go again. Here's somebody, you know, this situation might be just like the last one. And I have to do a better job. We have to do a better job in law enforcement and really teaching them and giving them a better understanding of our culture and why we do things and how we do things so that they can react appropriately.
Yes. You mentioned a couple of things. My dad the other day mentioned that when you're if you living in Richmond, a black woman see 4 black guys hanging outside of a store or something, you may look at it completely different because you know what 4 guys hanging out looks like, as opposed to 4 guys selling drugs or fighting a crime or something. Whereas somebody who, like you said, coming from Vacaville, they may, 4 black guys hanging out, from what I've ever seen on TV or what I've ever heard, that automatically means it's a mob, the riots inciting, whatever it is. So I agree, we need to have more diversity in the police force, more people policing their own neighborhoods. But also there needs to be, for me, I think there needs to be more accountability on an officer's end as well. Like for instance, in the George Floyd situation, one of the cops got released on $750,000 bond. That's $75,000 because it takes 10%. Now, keeping it honest, if I murdered somebody, I'm not getting out of jail, especially for $75,000. So I think there needs to be the same accountability that if a life is taken, I don't care if you have that shield on or not. Like you said, there's certain trainings and certain protocols and places that prevent these types of things from happening. So those, you need to be held accountable. And lastly, what do you think is different about this particular protest and why, like you said, legislation will be changed, there will be policy changes and things? What's different about this than maybe the last 3, 4, 5 years or deaths that we may have had where people did protest for a week or 2, but no legislation changed, nothing really came of it? What do you think it is you can attribute to this being different and actually leading to some hopefully systemic change moving forward?
I think it's the allies that we have in this movement. We have people not just of color, we have white people, black people, Mexican. I mean, everybody kind of is coming together on this one, and that's really what it's going to take. And that's where I see the changes, is that all of our allies, policymakers are saying, okay, I hear the community and enough is enough. So I think the fact that we have a lot of allies on our side in terms of making those changes is helping us in this particular case.
Yeah, we are seeing a lot more people involved in the previous marches and protests. And, you know, that's one of the things that, you know, I'm praying for, is that it's really going to be real change coming out of this particular incident versus the other protests that we've had, you know, in the past. And because, I mean, this is nothing new. We've been protesting wrongful deaths, police brutality since the 50s, 40s. So it's up to us now to stay engaged. Don't let the next, you know, hot news take precedence over this particular problem. And then also, you know, stay focused on how do we implement those changes. We had Shimon Walton on a call last week, 10th District Supervisor in San Francisco, and that's one of the topics that we addressed was policies. You also mentioned that you're not capable of making those policy changes that you would like to see done. So, as a community, as citizens, as people across the nation, what do you think would be the process for, or what is the process for moving forward with having those policies put in place that need to be in place? That's one that's going to start eradicating racism within the police agencies, and then two, implementing the training policies that need to be put in place, such as what you mentioned, being more involved with the community before they put on a gun, being involved in introducing, being integrated into the communities that they will be serving on a day-to-day basis before they start policing that community. So that way they are more aware of what type of individuals, who the individuals are that they will be servicing.
So I think policy changes, those fall on the chief of police. So that will fall on me. And those are the types of things that I'm implementing here within our agency. And I think when other agencies see that you're doing something that works, then they tend to want to look and see, okay, what are you doing? And that's kind of how it spreads amongst the law enforcement community. In terms of more of those larger scale change, those changes that I want to see, pie in the sky kind of changes that will affect the entire industry. Those are all mainly kind of legislative and law changes that we really have to, it comes down to voting and getting the right people who are going to represent us and our, what we want to see happening into office. And so, like one of the things that I think can help would be to have some type of recertification program for officers every few years. Like every 5 years, they have to, go before a board and show how many complaints they have and all, put everything out there. I think that will help keep people in line if they know that every 5 years they have to re-up and that their job could possibly be taken from them. Maybe that will keep people in order and doing what they should be doing. So I would like to see something like that in place. But that's a whole legislative change. I would say the challenge is unions are very strong. Police unions have a lot of power. They're very strong. They give money to a lot of different political campaigns. And so those are some of the challenges that we're up against. Most police leaders, executives, managers know who in our agencies are problemed people. But keeping them or getting them off the force or keeping them off the force is the challenge. There's people that we fire, but because of policies in place that we have no control over, I can fire an officer and they could go through a whole arbitration process and get their job back. And I have no choice but to put them on the streets, even though I've already said that I don't think that they should be an officer within my organization, and my hands are tied. And then the public looks at me like I'm not doing anything about it. And so that's the frustrating and challenging part. But those are legislative things that I'm hoping will be changed and can be changed if we elect the proper people in office that's willing to fight against the norm and change them.
That's huge. That's huge, because I'm sure most people don't know how that process looks. And like you mentioned, I'm sure it's frustrating for you, being the fact that you need to see, you want to see the change, where the change needs to happen. And those particular officers who don't need to be on the force, however, your hands are tied. So with that, with the right people around, legislative wise, and the right political positions, will they be going into, how would they be educated in knowing what policies actually what those policies look like and what those policies need to change, what policies actually need to change?
So there's different work groups, like there's a Black police officer executive group, Noble, National Black Officers, Executive Officers in law enforcement. And so groups like that, they know what changes need to be made. And so if the legislators come to us, or we're able to go to them and share what our thoughts are, what I'm sharing with you guys right now. But also, I continue to meet with all the different neighborhood groups and community groups that ask to meet with me. And I'm very honest and open about what changes need to happen, but it has to come from the community level. All the people that are that also want to see the change. Because I'm one person, I'm one department, and I might have several friends that are like-minded, and we can try to do what we can do. But when there's pressure coming from all over, that's when changes actually truly happen. And so my job is try to educate people on where I find the challenges to be in terms of getting rid of bad officers. And my hopes is that that will carry and spread throughout the community so that those things can be addressed.
And that goes back, Benny, to what you always mention. It's not only important to vote, but it's important to learn local legislation and vote locally, because those are the things that directly impact you more so than the presidency. I know a lot of people, they'll go vote for the president every 4 years, but that's the only voting they do. They don't really get involved in midterms. They really don't get involved locally voting for sheriffs and all these different things. We have to educate ourselves and arm ourselves with that information to make sure that I understand what legislation my police chief is trying to get passed, because if that now comes down to where I can impact it with my vote, I need to get out there and make that change. So that goes back to what Benny says all the time. And then it goes back to what I mentioned the other day. We need to also have people like that look like us in political positions, whether that's being involved on a school board of education as a council member, working your way up to mayor, whatever the case is. We have to get involved politically as well, because oftentimes, nice to say this, when I worked at Kaiser all the time, you got a lot of people who make the rules and the regulations for how it's going to work on the ground level, and they live in an ivory tower somewhere, so they really have no idea what the ground level looks like. And it's going to take sometimes people who live in Richmond to police Richmond, people who live in Richmond to be politicians in Richmond, people who grew up in Oakland to take political office in Oakland. So we have to get involved more than just always complaining. We got to get out there and not only vote, but sometimes run for some of these offices and higher positions as well.
Yeah, and one of the other policies that that's gaining popularity right now, and it's in the news, also, I know it's one of the policies that Shamann Walton is pushing in San Francisco, is the reallocation of funds to the police departments. And Bisa, you and I, we discussed this briefly. And to me, and obviously, I mean, I could understand how rediverting that money is going to put pressure on the police department and put pressure on the people that's reaping the benefits of that money. It's going to put pressure on them to make those changes. However, on the other hand of that is you have policies that need to be put in place. You have trainings that need to be put in place. You have new hiring systems that need to be put in place. That's going to take money. So what's your understanding and what's your feelings of that reallocation of funds? And this might gain a momentum and be a situation across the nation. Governor Cuomo in New York, I know he had mentioned the same thing, that's one of the things that they're going to be implementing. So what's your opinion on how that's going to benefit, or how that's going to enforce or push the change that you're seeing that is needed in the police departments?
I see it as, I don't necessarily see it as a bad thing. The problem with it is that I think the narrative is we defund police departments for these services that, we don't think that they should be doing. And the fact of the matter is, I don't think that we should be doing them either. And I'm referring to the mental health, responding to mental health calls, and responding to homelessness issues, and responding to, drug addiction issues. So there are, and there's many more. There are things that have fallen on the police department's shoulders in terms of social service work that we really shouldn't be involved in and shouldn't have been taking on in the first place. The problem is that these things have fallen on our shoulders without funding. I mean, these were given to us by default. These programs have been defunded over time in different areas, social services or whatever, but there was no money that was diverted to the police department to handle it. It was just by default, we had to handle these things. And so I have no problem not handling these things, because we're ill-equipped to handle a lot of these things. We try to get officers trained and stuff, but we did not train for 6 months in an academy and another 6 months on the streets of whatever city that we work on to really deal with mental health issues, the homeless issues that we're seeing. And so I see where, I mean, there can be money taken from police departments to help in these areas, because if we're not responding to those calls, then maybe we don't need as many officers in the police department. But I think that the focus really should be into building these other resources before the conversation gets into just defunding police services, because the issue that we'll have now, and that we're starting to face, and some communities have already done it, is they are starting the defunding of the police departments, but they don't have these other services in place. So we're still going to be handling these situations, and we're still ill-equipped to handle them. And so when we're ill-equipped to handle something, that's when things really go bad and they go wrong, because we were never truly meant to deal with these situations in the first place. So just to get back to your point, I do think that these social services need to be funded. And I think we need to get back to putting the responsibility where it should be. And that's where the people have the training and expertise to deal with them. But I think that these things need to be solidified before, we just talk about taking the money away and not really having those programs in place. Another thing that goes with that is our school resource officers. There's a big push not to have police officers in the schools. And even last night, our school board locally voted to defund the SRO contract, school resource officer contract. And so now, as of now, we will no longer have school resource officers in West Contra Costa County Unified School District. And I could tell you, our program was a great program. We have students that were contacting our school resource officers when they didn't feel comfortable contacting anybody else. And it was not a relationship of law enforcement. It was building true relationships with our youth. And that it's going to, our relationship with the youth in our community is going to suffer because of this loss of contract. And we'll figure other things out, but I don't think people really think through the implications of that. We used to take guns off school grounds every week. And that was, and no student ever, I won't say ever, but no students were hurt when we were taking guns off of them. We tried to divert a lot of those programs to diversion, and instead of having those kids go into the criminal justice system, based on the relationships that our school resource officers had with those students, with their parents, with the administration in our schools. And now those relationships won't be built over time. And when a police officer is responding to a school with a student with a gun and they have no idea who this student is and there's no relationship there, there's more propensity for violence or for things to go bad. And so that's where I'm really concerned with some of these decisions that really aren't thought through.
I agree with you. I think it further perpetuates the situation if I take away a cop from school, but I don't address the situation of the children bringing guns to school. Now the guns get brought into school and there's nobody there to address the situation. So I agree with you. I think they have to put certain programs and education in place first. Let's get this homelessness to a level before I just defund policing the homeless. You know what I mean? Because as you said, if I just defund it, now no one's there to police the homeless, that situation perpetuates and has a propensity, as you said, to exacerbate and get far worse. So I think we have to do a lot better as far as finding solutions before we debunk something else. We need to find certain solutions and find certain avenues in certain places to make sure the resources are in place. Then we can talk about reallocation of funds, but we need to do a lot better as far as the strategies put into place prior to that.
Yeah, I think the George Floyd incident has really highlighted the racial inequities, especially in the law enforcement system. But really, when we talk about all of these issues, this is systemic racism through almost every system that we have to deal with, the health system, the homeless system, resources. And I know that's what you guys are about in terms of empowerment and for our folks, but law enforcement is one part of it. And I know it's a huge part because we have the ability to take away people's liberties and freedom. And so it is a huge part. I'm not trying to downplay that, but really we have to be talking about the inequities and the racism throughout every system that we've been forced to deal with our entire lives.
Let's talk about that. That's a great point. Let's talk about that, because that was going to be our next topic. This systemic racism that's built in the infrastructure of America. Racism is not new. Racism's been here since the establishment of the United States. However, now with social media, it's becoming a lot more relevant. It's you pick up your phone and the news is right there in your face. The news that you watch on 11 o'clock and 5 o'clock, it might not tell the whole story. Now we have people that are live right there at the event. However, even that's still telling one side of the story. That's like, you're looking from your own eyes, you still have your own perspective on what's going on. So with that said, that could be fueling the established racism, the established mindset that people already have of a particular race, a particular culture. So obviously, it's just the difference between the two. The systemic racism is the system of racism, the system that's built around racism, how the system operates with that mindset of racism. So I mean, obviously, we talked about voting in the right policymakers, voting in the people that have our true, are connected to the people, that are really connected to the people and really trying to make a push towards a positive mindset, to push towards a positive community between the policymakers and the community. So outside of voting, how do we address, and what do you think is the way to address those systemic racisms that are established in the other systems that are already in place, where it may not be a voting process, it's a hiring process. How do we put pressures on those other services to make changes within their policies, within their hiring processes, to make sure that they're vetting the people that they're hiring is not going to impact negatively on the people that they're serving?
I think we have to get involved in the process. One thing that I'm re-implementing that we had done before is involving the community in our hiring practices. Making sure somebody's there when we're interviewing people so that we're getting the community input as to who they want to see in their community. And I think that we just need to be really looking at every system and how we can impart ourselves into those systems and review and point out, because it might just be, I don't want to see that people are doing it intentionally. Some people are to keep us out, but some people might not know. And so we have to impart, how we feel about things and how it might be racist or how a policy or a practice that a company or department or institution might be implementing something that they don't see, but how it might be biased towards people of color. And so we need to be looking at all of those practices that we know have kept us out of certain areas over time and saying, hey, look, I'm telling you, so it's up to you to do better. Now, you can't say that you don't know, because I'm telling you that by doing this is the result that you're going to get. I had a conversation with a young man the other day about police departments and how we label people as gang members. And he was like, I know that you might not change, but I'm just telling you how I feel as a community member, and when you do this, when you label people as gang members, how that affects us, not just in a particular case, but how that affects our lives moving forward. And we're all connected. And when you label me a gang member and I can't go into a certain area because I've been labeled a gang member, now I can't go see my grandmother, my cousins or whatever, because they're from that particular area. So everything has an effect. And I didn't think about all of those chain reaction effects and just bringing that to my attention. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I need to look at how we do things around here. And I think that can be imparted in everything that we do. We just have to speak up and really educate people.
Yeah. And that's ultimately what it comes down to. We got to educate ourselves. We got to educate. I was a guest on the show the other day, and I mentioned, I kept pulling up my shirt, each one teach one. It's our job to not only pay it forward, to pay it back. Like, I'm doing some work right now with my dad and my son on this little house in my second backyard to help my son out with a little playroom or whatever. And every day I make my dad, when he comes over, I'll make him some breakfast, some lunch, and some dinner or something. He's like, man, he really appreciates it. And I'm like, dude, I'm just paying you back for all the times you brought me breakfast in bed and instilled in me work ethic at 5 in the morning, dribbling with my left hand blindfolded, talking about smell me, feel me, hear me, taste me, but you can't see me. Like he teaching you all these things in life that when you're 5 years old, you may not understand, but as you mature and get older, you start putting into practice. So with him, I'm paying it back, but with my son, it's my duty to pay it forward. So I make him breakfast every morning the way my dad did me. And I instill in him certain things that my dad instilled in me. So education is key. That's where it's going to start. But I think we also have to realize with that education, civil rights was what, 50 years ago. You know what I mean? That's within almost, I'm 41. That's right before my lifetime. That's in my parents' lifetime. That's in a lot of my family members' lifetime, that we just got certain freedoms to be able to sit in restaurants and drink from water fountains and use restaurants and have voting rights and things like that. So that's not even one generation. That's just one generation removed, I should say. So we have to educate ourselves and realize that some of this systemic racism, whether it's in the police force, the way we get access to healthcare, access to information in regards to finances, access to just education in general, all of these different things, we got to realize it just became available to us within the last 50 years. And that's the reason why it's so systemic is what slavery was 4 generations ago, 157 years ago. It takes sometimes 5, 6, 7 generations for something to stop being so systemic. So I'm hoping that within, hopefully, my grandchildren's lifetime, we'll actually start to see some real systemic change. And it starts right here with these type of conversations right now, and having open, candid conversations about where we've been, where we are, where we're trying to go, but also having strategic talks on how we're going to do it like we're doing right now. How do we do that? Is it get out there and vote? Is it legislation? Is it being more active? Is it starting your own companies? Is it doing certain things on your own? And I'm glad we have this platform because it allows people to now have that growth mindset instead of a fixed mindset, like we said in our first podcast, and start expanding the way we think as a collective unit. Benny and I are trying to empower anybody. Obviously, we're Black men and we care about our community. But if you're Caucasian, if you're a Latino, if you're a Hispanic, whatever it is, Asian descent, we're going to help you out with the information. It's just important for us coming up in our neighborhoods and knowing our community that it's important to give that back, especially to our community, which is why we go so hard in what we do. So thank you for being a guest today. We really appreciate it. Benny, thank you for everything you do. I'll let you finish it off, but I just wanted to throw that in there. We really appreciate you coming in today and helping us out with this topic from a perspective of the blue lives. So thank you very much for that. Very critical.
Thank you. I just want to
make sure. Oh, go ahead, because I was about to give you the platform. I want to make sure, because I know we talked about a couple other things that you guys are doing and that you've implemented into the Richmond Police Department as far as community touches, different trainings that you guys do. So I just want to make sure that we give you a platform that you would address everything that you guys are doing to help, with the problem that's at hand.
So I just want to piggyback off what Mr. Macklin just talked about in terms of civil rights and how we've been doing this work for so long. And I think one of the things that has taken so long is this work is really exhausting. I don't know about you guys, but over the last couple of weeks with everything that's happened, I'm exhausted because it's not just working to do, it's also dealing with your emotions and your feelings and everything that goes around, when incidents like this happen. So I think that that's one of our challenges, but also going back to what we said in the first place, why we think this one is different is because we have other allies to help us. It's sad that all of this work has really rested on our shoulders when we're really, the victims in all this. We're really the ones that, have been oppressed through all these years, yet it's been on us. It's fallen on our shoulders to make the changes and the difference. And so I'm glad that some other people are stepping up to the plate to say, I'm going to help you guys with this struggle. I'm going to help get things to where they need to be. So I just want to say that. But also, Benny, when we've talked about what we've done here around the department, we've been working on changing our relationship with the community for many years now, for over 10 years. And it goes back to, you read my bio and you said that I used to be a community policing officer. Well, that was when I started 22 years ago. We had, specific programs for community policing. And we moved away from that because it can't just be a couple officers in each neighborhood that are focused on community policing. Our entire workforce needs to be community policing officers, not just a few people. It can't just rest on a couple people to go make those connections. I want every single one of my officers to know people in their community and making those daily interactions every day, because that's really what it takes for my officers to get to understand the community better, and for the community to build that trust with the community, so that when something happens, they're willing to call us and come forward and we can solve these problems together. So we've done a lot of work in that over the last 10 plus years in building those relationships. Additionally, procedural justice and implicit bias training, you know, those are some more newer terms and things that we've been focusing on more recently in this profession. And really, it's only mandated, I think, every 5 years that officers go through that type of training. But 5 years, I mean, really, we're going to talk about this once every 5 years. So we've implemented in our department where we're talking about those things on a continual and constant basis, and we're involving our community in those conversations, because every community is different. We need to hear from our own specific community, and we need them to be teaching us and training us on how to better connect with the people that we're serving. And so those are a couple of the things that we're implementing. Additional things that I'm looking at is, I already talked about having the community on our hiring panel, so that when we're getting ready to hire new officers, they have their input and they're seeing who we're hiring, and they're giving us the blessing that, yes, I think this person will be good for our community. Additionally, really integrating people into the community when we hire them, before we give them the gun, that they're going out there and they're being integrated with our community and learning the history before they're out there actually enforcing laws, being more of that peace officer. The history of policing really is with the community. I mean, Sir Robert Peel early on said the police are the community are the police. That means that the police, that the community are really the watchdogs, and we should only be coming in when there's no other option available. And so we need to get back to that mentality instead of this more enforcement, because that has not worked.
That's great. That's great. And one more point before we go. I know we're coming up to the hour mark, and I promise we'd let you go by that time so we can go grab you some lunch for your next call. So yeah, it's one of the things that, you know, she had mentioned that, you know, with everything going on right now, she's exhausted, and it's rightfully so, because she's back-to-back meetings all day. So again, thank you so much for making time for us today. How do you combat the culture within the different police organizations, in the different police departments? And I know that's one of the things that you're doing, and whether you're aware of it now or not, with different policies and different policies that you've implemented into your department, creating that culture that it's not just blue blood versus everyone else. It's okay to put a hand on your partner's shoulder when you know your partner is doing something wrong. It's okay to have a conversation and be accountable to your department, be accountable to yourself, to be accountable to your partner, with saying that, okay, look, this is, you might be going a little bit too far. You're going a little bit too far. This is, this particular situation doesn't merit, where you're at mentally right now or emotionally right now. Let me step in. How do you combat that culture where, you're not feeling like you're snitching on your partner, or you're not turning your partner in, but you're putting both of you in a position, and as well as the person that the community that you're working with, in a better position overall?
I think it comes with two things. One, some policies can do that, and we do have policies in place that say that you will intervene when an officer is using too much force. That's been in our policy manual before this George Floyd incident happened, and it will continue to be in our manual. There is a duty to intercede, and so having those conversations, having those policies in place are helpful in holding people accountable. But the other thing is we have to have constant communication and conversations around all of these issues. And that's where I think that we've failed. Conversations, especially around race, are difficult to have. I work with a lot of people who don't share my same political views, that, we have very differing views. but no, I know them, I know their families, I know that they're good people, even though, and that's where I struggle, because I know that these are good people. I interact with them, you know, their heart's in the right place. But then when we start talking politics, it's like, whoa, hold on, that's way off from what I think or how I think. And so there's this difficulty in really figuring out, you know, how do I work with this person when we have such different views? But, you know, it all comes down to really understanding each other and having respect for each other, and actually providing the culture and providing a space here where we feel comfortable sharing our viewpoints and perspectives in a respectful way, so that we can understand each other better. And that's where we start. It's not that I'm going to change, I might not change somebody's mind, but it's important that we're open enough to hear different perspectives, because that's how we learn and we grow. And the hope is that I can change people's perspective and show how, you know, different things have hurt communities of color, especially when they don't have that personal experience. And so we're having more of those conversations around here. It's not easy, because we have to work with each other. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to, difficult conversation, we have to go out there and depend on each other to have each other's backs and stuff. So, you know, the trust building, to be comfortable enough to come into a room and be open and honest and not feel like you're being attacked. Those are the challenging conversations, but much needed. And that's what I'm trying to do here within our organization.
And thank you for having those difficult conversations. We really appreciate that, because you're right. Anytime I talk about wanting to help Black business owners around my white counterparts or constituents, it seems like, I don't know, like I'm maybe trying to tread lightly almost. Like, it's not that I don't care about you guys. It's just that I know my history, and I know too often times we're missing the boat, and we're the last ones to hear about the importance of home ownership or life insurance, or the importance of police, the importance of investing in a 401k or the stock market. We always hear about this stuff too late. So once again, we're here to help everybody, but one of my main focuses is to make sure that I impact my community directly with this information. And I really appreciate us having these conversations with people who are just like us, from the same neighborhoods and the same community, that have the same mindset and that same outlook as far as impacting the community. And this is your way of impacting the community, is through the police force, which is honestly somebody we should be able to trust. So I'm glad that we have somebody like you policing us over here in Richmond. And I'm glad to have you on the show once again. But thank you for your time. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your vast wealth of knowledge that you've shared with us today. And I look forward to a further dialogue with you, maybe on another one of these shows in the future, as well as offline. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Bisa. So please, everyone, this was a live call. This will be posted on our Global Empowerment Team page. You can check us out on YouTube. Check out our previous videos. Give us a thumbs up or give us a comment. You know, actually, you know, leave us a comment on who else you might want to see or put us in contact with that you would like to see on this show. And then also just enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much all for chiming in. And Bisa, again, thank you so much for your time. You are out there doing great things. You are definitely one of the good cops, the good people. We need more of you out there, definitely.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, bye.